Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Abadi, and you're watching Vintage Motocross Q&A. In the studio with me, via satellite, let's say that, is the Professor Gary Bailey. Gary, thank you for joining me tonight.
Oh, yeah, man. Good honor. I appreciate you calling and asking me to do this, man. I thought people forgot about the old guys.
No, we didn't forget about you, Gary. But before we get started with your questions and your story, I have to thank the people that make this show possible. Sure. Motion Pro, Preston Petty Products, Full Circle Racing, Vintco, Tiny's Towing, the International Motocross Museum, Racer X Magazine, Northwest Mako CZ, and the York Swap Meet. Gary, you are a accomplished an author. You taught motocross schools. You are a member of the AMA Hall of Fame. There are so many things that you've done in your life. You have been given the name The Professor. So let's get started. Well, maybe we should get started with that professor thing. Is that a self-proclaimed name, or did somebody name you The Professor?
Actually, it started out first with Cycle News East, and there was an article they did, and it was they didn't call it professor. They said professor's cure for the European invasion, something like that. And then it came from there, and this name just kind of stuck.
Hey, Gary, you know what I got to mention too? I want a lot of people to see your interview. So I want to tell them to keep sharing the show, whether they're on Facebook or you're on YouTube. And later on or tomorrow on the Facebook page, we'll give away a sticker sheet like this, compliments of Vintco. So we understand where the name The Professor came from. Cycle News had something to do with that.
Yes.
Now, I understand that you actually come from a family of motorcyclists and that it was your grandfather who had a motorcycle shop. What were the times like there, and is that really where you got your feet wet in motorcycling, so to speak?
Well, my grandfather not only had a motorcycle shop, he had a lot of success in motorcycles before then. When he was 16 years old and he was in Waco, Texas, he'd bought his first motorcycle. My grandfather started doing long distance racing, the salt flats. He did some board track racing. He did quite a few things, and he held some records for a long time, like long distance records, like from Barstow to Phoenix, Arizona. So he was.
That was your mom's dad or your dad's dad? Was his name Bailey also?
Nope, it was Tex Bryant.
Oh, okay.
And Tex was a name that was given to him because I guess the name Willie probably wasn't the one. So he got the nickname Tex Bryant from Texas, and I'm not sure who named him that, but that's what he stuck with his whole life.
Okay. So at 13 years old, you got a Tiger Cub. Is that a 200cc bike?
200cc. It was actually my brother's, because my brother was a year and a half older than I am. And Bob started racing out in the desert, and my grandfather was still doing some cross-country racing at that time, a little bit of the hare and hound stuff. That was about the only thing he was doing because he was getting a little up in age. My brother rode that for about a year and a half, and then he got a new 57 Cub. So I got the 55, and I don't know if people are familiar with a 55 Cub, but it's pretty known that there was not much suspension on the bikes back then.
Okay.
This particular bike had no rear suspension. It was pretty much a rigid frame with some like plungers on the back. So it was about like having no suspension. Then the newer bikes, I think they changed that in 57, and they actually had shocks on the rear end. And so he got him a new bike, and I rode that one for a while. And then in 59, my brother Bob and I both each bought a brand new 1959 Triumph Cub, which we rode for, I don't know, I rode mine for longer than he rode his. But yeah, that's what we rode a lot. We were riding desert, and I started doing a lot of scrambles, TT scrambles.
Gary, where exactly was this? In Southern California?
This is all in Southern California.
Okay.
I remember my first actual scrambles race was down in San Pedro area at a place called Rusty Nails. The name got Rusty Nails because there used to be, I believe it was a military complex there,
Okay.
but some kind of a housing complex. And they had tore all that down. And of course, back then, you could ride mostly anywhere, not like today.
Yeah.
So did a lot of racing at Rusty Nails. And then I did several races at Acton, and not Axton. Don't get that confused with where I live in Axton. It was called Acton in California, somewhere up in the Palmdale area, a little bit north up in that area.
Okay.
Surprisingly, I just learned here a few years ago that Mike Bell lives right in that area, and Mike Kudrowski lives up in that same area. So I
Yeah.
hadn't been there a long time, so I no telling what it looks like. I'm sure it's different. So that's where I got my start doing most of my racing. Was pretty much the desert, and then I got a little bit more into the scrambles and hare scrambles stuff. And I mean the scrambles and TT scrambles. Difference between scrambles, TT scrambles. The TT scrambles were always graded nice and flat, where the scrambles that I like best was always the natural terrain stuff. Like, they just put a marker here, put a marker there, put a little chalk line out here. They take you around, show you the course, and go, okay, this is how the course goes today, guys. And so it was pretty wide open, honest. I mean, you could have cut the course if you wanted to, but you were going to get caught, I'm sure.
So tell me this, Gary. At that time, who was promoting those races? Who was putting on those races? Were those AMA events, or what were they?
Oh no, they weren't AMA events back then. Honestly, a few
Just
years
local
back,
clubs?
13 years old, it was all club racing. Everything back then was club racing, which I thought was really cool because you pretty much were you're supposedly going to enter a club. The nice thing about clubs, as a difference in promoters racing, is when you joined a club, you had to work at least two. I think it might have been two or three of the events a year. I think it was two events of the year. You actually had to work those events. So I mean, there was several clubs. I mean, there was, I don't know, a dozen or more clubs, and so they were the ones that put on the events. So you actually knew what it took to put on an event. You knew how much energy and time that it took. Where
Yeah.
today the riders have no clue. They have no clue what it takes to prep a track, the time, the money, the effort. And by the clubs, I thought that was really cool because everybody had to do that. And so it was pretty neat.
Gary, speaking about responsibilities and being a member of a club and how to work at that club in order to be able to race, and you would appreciate it. I mean, you're growing up at your grandpa's motorcycle store. You're involved with motorcycles. What did you do to support that? Did you have a job as a teenager, or how did you do all that?
Uh, all of that. It starts as a long story, but the first part of it, how did I support it? Well, when I was 13 years old, I got my first motorcycle. I actually went down to the grocery store, and I think you were supposed to be 15 in order to be able to get a job at that time.
Hmm.
And I was tall. I was like 6'4" at the time, and 13-year-old kid. And I went in there and I asked, "Hey, you got any? I need a job." Yeah, we need you. You can work as a box boy. And I'm like, I'm good with that. And they never did really ask me my age, so I didn't have to lie. Uh, I guess they assumed as big as I was that I was old enough. So I started working in a grocery store at first it was after school. And that's kind of how I supported myself because my grandfather, he wasn't one to give you anything. You were going to work for it.
Sure.
And my parents were kind of the same way. It's like, I'm not giving you this and giving you that. If you want that, go work and earn it.
Yeah. Don't forget to visit one of our sponsors, FullCircleRacing.com. They're online. Thank you, Tom McAllister at Full Circle Racing. Gary, how long did that go on with the little Triumph 200 and you racing those scrambles and flat track events?
Let's see. I would say that went from about 57 to around 60. Oh, I get the years right. 63, 64. And it was the changeover because everything people don't know back then it was all 4 strokes, very, very few 2 strokes. I had started racing a little bit of professional flat track TT racing, like at Ascot Park on the half mile.
Okay.
I pretty much just borrowed a bike from a friend. Hey, and they go, yeah, you want to race this thing? And it was a 650 Triumph. And so that's kind of what, and then when Yamaha come out with their Yamaha 80 trail bike, at the same time Honda had come out with their Honda Trail 90. And that was really the kind of the change for me from going to the big 650 4 strokes and getting onto the 2 stroke. And with that, took everything off it, modified it, doing the exhaust pipe. They had what they called a gift kit for this Yamaha. And it was a different rotary valve and different exhaust pipe, and it made this little bike pretty fast, actually. I was big on it, obviously. 6'4" at the time. I was a little big on that thing, but it's kind of like, you know what? There was a lot of flat track and TT races very close, like within 30, 40 minutes of me, the different tracks that were like Southgate Speedway and some of those. So, and they had like Wednesday and Thursday night races. So I kind of got into running a lot of the races with that bike. A few scrambles started out about them. Scrambles were all the natural terrain. It's kind of what motocross is today, only all natural terrain. I started racing a little bit of that. So I was actually racing sometimes 2-3 times a week, because I could do the Wednesday night thing. I could go down south a little bit and run the Thursday night race. I tried to go to there used to be a TT track in Elsinore. People know Elsinore more for the motocross stuff, but up in the hills, there was a track there that I went to and raced. And that's kind of started. And of course, then Hodaka's come in. And boy, as soon as Hodaka's come in, that was the first bike that really had like a small bike that actually had a frame, looked like a motorcycle, instead of the stamped out frame that the Honda and the Yamaha trail bikes had back then. So once I got into the Hodaka, little tiny bit bigger bike, 100cc. And I started having a lot of success on it. I was still running those flat track TT races on those little night tracks, which was pretty cool. Won a lot of races there. So now let's get to how I paid for this. I pretty much worked a deal with the guys at the speedways that, hey, can I if I win a trophy, can I get money for it? Because I didn't have enough money to get race to race to race. So they finally went, yeah, we'll give you, I think it was $5 we're going to give you for your trophy back. But $5 doesn't sound like a lot. We got to remember that gas at that point was 25 cents a gallon.
Yeah.
So big change. So they would buy my trophy back from me, and I was pretty fortunate because I always run 2 classes, and they had the flat track and
how did you get from race to race, Gary? Were your mom and dad involved in that, or did Bob take you? How did that work?
No, I ended up buying a Ford Ranchero.
Oh, because you were old enough to drive by then. Okay.
Yes, I was going to drive by then. So no, I kind of did all that on my own, and I had gotten married right when I got out of school, so I was having to support my family plus do this racing and get from race to race. And I always made just enough money to pay for my gas and going to the races. So, I mean, I just pretty much went, if I could race, I didn't care what it was, I was going to go and race. And then I got fortunate with the Hodaka days, I was winning a lot of stuff. And a gentleman named Nick Nicholson, who is the Greaves distributor on the West Coast, it's a funny story. He approached me one day when I was riding my Hodaka at one of the motocross races. And he said, hey, would you like to ride one of my Greaves? And I went, well, yeah, that'd be cool. And so I didn't know anything about sponsorship or anything. Like I wasn't getting much anything, and very few people were.
Okay.
And I said, yeah, that'd be cool. Yeah, I'd really like to. He says, well, get a hold of me. And he gave me a phone number. And I went about a month and a half, and I saw him at the race again. He goes, I thought you wanted to ride one of my bikes. And I go, yeah, I do, Nick, but I don't have the money to do it. He's like, no, I'm going to give you the bike. I'm going to give you the bike. All you got to do is just maintain it. And I'm like, seriously? And he goes, yeah. So I started racing my Hodaka, and I was racing this 250 Greaves. And then there was the 360 with a Springer front end on it.
Yes.
And I had asked him one day when I saw it, I said, hey, can I race that thing? And he goes, yeah, if you want to. So I started running the 100 class and the open class and the 250 class all in one day. Kind of the way I got my title Ironman was because I was running 3 classes. Here's the difference: 3 classes today, difference 3 classes back then. The senior class, which I was riding, they ran 20-minute motos. Junior class ran 15-minute motos. There was only a 100, I think a 125, a 250, and an open class. So basically what you had was 8 different classes of racing during in the day.
Okay.
3 times 20-minute motos. I was on the bike 3 hours total with no more than a 30-minute break between each one. Well, that's kind of, and at sometimes I won all 3 classes, which was totally just amazing. Somehow I got blessed to be able to do this.
Yeah.
And so it was really just a really good time back then. And that amount of racing, when I hear riders today complain about the bike, the suspension, how tired they are after this 30-minute moto, I'm like, you guys have no earthly idea.
No, they don't. But
I'm gonna find my 3 bikes, and I'm gonna have you go out there and race those 3 bikes every 30 minutes for 20 minutes, and then I want you to tell me how it is compared to today's bikes. So yeah, I got to run 3 classes all the time, and that was really good, and I was getting a lot of help from Nick. We even went to one race that was at that track on Saturday night, Elsinore up in the hills. And I actually, he goes, hey, Bailey, I got this 200 Springer front end thing. He goes, you want to take that with you? So I went to the Elsinore TT and I run 4 classes there. And it was always the best because they always ran a sweepstakes race at the end of the night. The sweepstakes race was the winner of each class. All right. So I usually won 3 or 4 of those classes. So what I got to do is pick which bike I wanted to ride, because the 100 got to start nearly 3/4 of a lap ahead. And then as it would go around until the expert, the open class bike would be back here. It's still sitting on the starting line. And so I kind of look and see the riders, who they were, how good I knew they were. So I could pick whatever bike I wanted to ride, and then I'd line up there. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's.
Now, Gary.
Wait a minute. I lived in the best time for life and for racing motorcycles. It was fun. You did it for fun. You did it for money. You did it for.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, your generation had the coolest cars, the best music, and the best motorcycles. You know?
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about that. And if I'm not mistaken, and I have it somewhere in my notes here, I think you were the last guy to put a Greaves on the box in the Trans Am series. I think it was 1970, where you wrote a Trans Am on a Greaves.
Yeah, it was actually late '69, and we'll go into that later, because I signed a contract to ride for Bultaco, and that was in late '70.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I mean to get a Greaves, which was pretty much a dinosaur at that point. I mean, it wasn't that old. It was still competitive, but you did have by '69, you had your CZs and your Makos in there. You certainly had your Huskies. So that was quite a feat.
Well, the CZs and the Husky had I'd say a little bit of advantage over the Greaves, because the Greaves were just kind of been what they've been for quite a while.
Sure. Now, Gary, you know, you had some great finishes in the Trans Ams and in the Nationals, and you were even involved in the early Supercross race. You got a fourth overall for the season in 1974, and the only guys ahead of you were, I think, Buck Murphy, Pierre Karsmakers finished first that year, and Rich Thorwaldsen. So you
Right.
got a fourth overall, but I think that was on the Bultaco by then, wasn't it?
Yes, sir. Let me back up just a minute before we get to Bultaco. I want to back up to
Take your
Graves.
time. Go ahead.
Um, you know, I was fortunate enough at Saddleback Park, July 4th, '69, to be first American to beat the Europeans.
Okay.
That was very cool. Um, what was interesting about that race, and it was a three moto format, and I had finished pretty good in both of them, but I ended up winning the last moto. I was just happy to be winning that moto. What I did not know that they did in the Grand Prix was the Grand Prix were all timed. So if there was any tie or close thing, they'd total up the three motos, and
Right.
the one that had the fastest time actually ended up winning. So I didn't even know that I won the overall until shortly after the race, and people, hey Bailey, you won the overall. And I'm like, are you kidding me? They go, yeah. It was, I mean, it was ridiculous. It was like 40 some seconds is what I won by over the guy that was second place guy. I mean, it was stupid. It was so close. And when I think back about it, the thing that sticks in my mind more than anything else was the very last moto. It was Stig Peterson. It was right on my butt. When I say on my butt, he was there every time I'd look back. I didn't look back too much, but I knew he was there. I was probably 3 laps from the end of the race. I was tired. I mean, when I say tired, I was like done.
Sure.
And there was this valley, the way the track was laid out at Saddleback Park, and there were people on all sides of it. And I just come through the valley, and there's how many hundred people standing, and they're yelling, "Go Bailey!" And I mean, it was like somebody just shot me with adrenaline, just gave me a shot and went boom, and I went, man, I can't let him by now. I just can't. And so I remember that coming through that valley. I remember the people hollering, and got to the finish line, and he was still right there. And if it hadn't have been for those people, I probably wouldn't have won that moto, and I dang sure would have slowed down a little bit and not won it because of the time. So it was that close. My other best race, the one I had a lot of good races.
Okay, I know you did.
But the one that really sticks in my mind, and it kind of got lost in because of the Europeans and all like that. But we run in '69 at Westlake Village, the Grand Prix, International Grand Prix.
Right.
This was on my 360 Greaves. There was 21 Europeans entered, and I got third overall. That to me was, yeah, that's it is wow. If you see the names, and there is a wow there, because I mean Saddleback was cool, and I mean there was two of the world championship guys there, and a couple other of the Europeans on the fourth. But that race for me was way more. Every time I look at the results and I look at the sheet, I just go, wow, that was, oh my God, that was a good finish.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's pretty much my Greaves stuff. A lot of stories in there, but that's pretty much my Greaves time.
Tell me about the Supercross series, the first year, 1974. You're in there on a Bultaco.
Well, actually, that wasn't the first year. That was the first year that
No,
AMA stuff.
it was 74. We've been running a couple of years already. 72, I think, was the first one or something like that.
Yeah.
Finished fourth overall in 74.
Yes. And that was the time I was just getting ready to be done with racing pretty much, because I was going to focus a little bit more on my schools, and I still did a lot of local stuff, but I wasn't going to do the nationals anymore. And yeah, that was a good time, and a lot of good racing. But you know, in the nationals in '72, I won two AMA nationals in '72.
Yes, you did.
So that's a feat. And you know, when you go back and you look at the results and you see how few guys through the years have won a national or two, it's pretty neat to go, wow, I accomplished that as well. So a lot of good things, man. So many good times, so many good stories.
Sure. But did you like that Supercross scene, or you really weren't a fan of it?
Yeah, well, you know, I laid out, a lot of people don't know this, but in 71, when I did Daytona for the first year,
Yes.
and then in 73, I actually built Daytona, I built Houston, and I built Dallas. I built all three of those tracks, and I was racing them, so I pretty much had my hands full doing it. 74. Let me tell you one story about 74.
Okay.
1974, Houston Astrodome. I'm standing out in the air, kind of looking at the track that I'm going to make sure everything's going good because I'm building the track there. But I'm standing out there with Pomeroy and gosh, I don't remember who all the other guys were. There was 3 or 4 of us standing there. And David at the time, and I remember David's only like 12 years old. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And David comes walking out and he says, "Hey, Dad, what do you want me to do with your chain? I don't know how long you've been riding, but the old chain used to get kinks in them. Do you remember that? They
Yeah.
get knotted and they just like try to freeze up."
Sure.
And so David comes out and he said, "Dad, what do you want me to do with this chain? It's all got those kinks and everything in it." Well, there's a way to fix them on a practice bike, but I'd never do it on a race bike. What was happening was the inner link would expand against the outer one, and it would kind of tighten up and freeze up on you. You could take the chain and lay it down on the ground on its side,
Yeah.
and you could literally make something that's not very sharp, maybe like a dull screwdriver we used to use, and you could hit each one of those links, bing, 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 all the way around, and you could literally free the chain up because what they were doing, the middle ones were just expanding against the other ones. But we never did that on the race bike. And I said, "Dave, you know where the chains are out in the trailer, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Go out there and get a new one and put it on the bike. And if you need to break the link or something, just let me know and I'll come help you break the link." So he walks away and Palmer and those guys are going, "Dave, who's your mechanic?" And I go, "David." And they go, No, seriously, come on, who's your mechanic?" And I go, "David, I'm telling you, I had 3 mechanics and I fired all 3 of them because when my bike broke when I was racing, that infuriated me. I was fit to be tied. And so you better make sure it was right. I mean, if it broke because of a real mechanical thing, that's one thing. But when parts are falling off, and that just infuriated me. So they go, "Seriously?" I said, "David, when he works on my bike, I'm telling you, he's with me from day one. When he started riding, I said, if you're going to ride it, you're going to fix it, you're going to clean it, I am not your maintenance man." So he knew how to do all that stuff. So the guys were laughing and serious. So anyway, so David was my mechanic at that race, and he knew exactly what the bike needed, and he kept an eye on everything. Maybe because he knew what would happen if my bike broke.
Hey, Gary, I want to back up just a second too.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about Supercross and we were talking about you designing different tracks.
Yes.
From my research, from what I understand, you went to the powers that be in the Los Angeles Coliseum before Mike Goodwin and presented an idea to build a track in that Coliseum. True?
Okay. You're almost there.
Oh, okay. Well, then get me the rest of the way there.
My brother was the one that went there.
Okay.
Because I was traveling around the country, and Bob went there and talked to the people, and it was all like, "Yeah, we can do this." No problem. When they laid the price out to him that it was going to take to do it, well, he didn't have it, and we didn't have friends that had that kind of money either. So it was kind of like crap. So I don't know if you know this, but Brother Bob went to Ascot Park. And I was there and helped him, and we laid out 2 years before that ever happened. And it might have been 3 years before. Let's see, it was 68. And that was Goodwin was 72. So 4 years before that ever happened, we were promoting motocross, because it wasn't called Supercross, inside of the Speedway at Ascot Park. Okay. And you want to know what's really funny? You know who one of our riders was?
No.
Mike Goodwin. So Mike Goodwin, who promoted the LA Coliseum, was there seeing what we were doing. And he's like, whoa, wait a minute. I got an idea. I'm going to go talk to him. He didn't even know Bob had talked to him. I'm going to go to Coliseum and talk to those guys about putting on an event. And he knew people. So obviously they ran this race. But the story is always, and you've probably heard it, Mike Goodwin laid out this on a napkin.
That's what you often hear, yeah.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm going to tell you, there was something before that part he doesn't talk about. So
it certainly sounds like it.
Yeah.
Gary, I want to move on to this book that you wrote, How to Win at Motocross. This one happened to be published in 1974. I'm going to say this before I start asking you any questions about it.
Yeah.
If you're a vintage motocrosser and you're riding the older bikes and tracks that are laid out like they were way back in the early 70s, this book still applies today as much as it ever did. And if you get a chance, get a copy of this book, How to Win at Motocross, by Gary Bailey, and he had some help from Carl Shipman as well. But this book is very, very applicable today, just as it was back in the early 70s. Tell me this, how did you be... I heard that in Ohio, there were some Europeans that were supposed to put on a school the day after a race. They canceled. Somebody came to you and said, Bailey, you got to teach everybody, you got to teach a school. Is that how it happened?
Yep. Well, the Pentons were putting on the event there. And I knew them pretty well because I was riding the Pentons for them at the time. And there was a knock on my door the night before. I think I was already in bed. I know it was dark out. And, and it was not John. It was his brother that passed away. Anyway, it was one of the Pentons. And they said, hey, Bailey, we need your help tomorrow. And I go, what? He goes, well, you know that motocross school is supposed to be here? And I'm going, yeah. He said, well, I just got a call from the European guys. I won't mention who it was, a couple of them. He said, they won't be able to do it tomorrow. And so I got 21 guys signed up, and can you do this school? And I went, well, yes, I don't know anything about it. I'd never done a school. I don't know anything about that. And they go, just do something, will you? Go out there, make them guys happy. And I'm like, so in the morning, everybody, I roll out and get ready. These guys are sitting there, 20 of them, like, and I got to go, I went over to where they were supposed to be. That's where they were supposed to meet. And I said, hey guys, Gary Bailey here, if you don't know me. And most of them go, hey, we know who you are, dude. Just wet. And I go, well, the Euros aren't going to be here. And some reason I got an idea, but some reason they're not going to be here. And so I've been asked to do this school. And I hope you guys are all right with that. And let me tell you the truth. I knew nothing about what I'm doing, okay? But here's what I want to do. I want to go to the start line, and I want to do a couple of starts. I want you to watch, and then I want you to ask questions about what I did that you thought was right or different or whatever. Just ask any questions you want to ask. And then after that, if a question, I'm going to let you guys do 2 or 3 times yourself. I'll watch each one of you, and we'll stop and we'll talk about it, and I'll tell you what I see, make some suggestions to you. And then we'll do it a couple more times. And then once we get that, we'll move on around to the next obstacle, first turn, jump, whatever. And we'll kind of go through the same scenario there. And so I did the whole thing, and I was like, everybody was like, dude, that was so good. That was so good. I learned so much. Dude, I don't know what those other guys would have done, but that was a great job. And I'm just going, holy crap, buddy. Okay. I thought I did pretty good, but I didn't know I could do that good. So I kind of I was doing the Inter-Am series. So I finished the Inter-Am series out, which I think our last race was, no, actually the last race was the one I told you about at Westlake Village, because we traveled all the way across country. And so Bob and I had an event, I believe it was December 3rd. Yeah, I think it was December 3rd. in 69. And it was at Ascot. And he says, hey, what do you think about doing a school? And I went, yeah, that'd be cool. Let's advertise the school. Okay, so we advertised the school, but you're not going to believe this. So I show up about 7 o'clock in the morning. And when I show up, there's a line. When I say a line of cars and trucks, cars with trailers, I'm just going, oh my God, dude. Whew. Okay. So I went inside the Speedway and I had the girls, the two of them that were doing the sign up. And I was in there kind of making sure the track was good and doing whatever we needed to do on the track, because Bob and I were doing that. And so about an hour later, one of the girls comes over and said, hey, where do we cut this off at? I go, what do you mean, where do we cut this off at? She goes, we're right almost 100 riders right now. And there's still a line.
And you're the only guy teaching the class. Was Bob helping you? You had to do this on your own.
Bob was there a little bit to kind of, but I was teaching the class. He was there to kind of, fill in something what he might have seen or whatever, And
okay.
So I'm like, oh my God. So I go, oh crap. I said, okay. They ended up being right at 100 with some more there. I think there was 12 more there. And I was thinking, shit, what's different? 12 more with that many rushes? Never get that many. I said, here's what you do. Sign up the last 12 guys, because they knew we were going to try and cut it off, and they were pissed because someone come from a long ways.
Right.
And so I said, let them sign up. Here's the deal. I'm going to make sure, I'm going to ask the other riders if it's okay if we throw these guys in there. If they say yes, it's a go. If they say no, get your money. And that's just it. I'm just sorry. You should have been here earlier. So they all agreed. Yeah, what difference does it make? This. So I had somebody I could go find a phone, get on the damn phone, and call Tim Hart, which is a really good friend of mine, and call Tim and tell him to get his ass out of bed and get down here, because I got a problem and I need help. And he don't need to know what the problem is. Just get your ass out of bed. So Tim shows up. I'm doing this little talk speech, how we're going to do and organize and how we're going to do it. And Tim shows up and I go, oh, here guys, here's Tim Hart. Y'all know Tim. So Tim's here to help too. And dude, we got to get moving, guys. We got a lot to do and a little time to do it. And, we ran through that school, and every guy, kind of the same thing. Either me or Timmy would do the demonstration so that I could focus more on the group and stuff. And he'd do a couple demonstrations in a section. Guys ask questions, and I go, okay, let's go. You all get to go. Everybody gets 2 runs through here. You know how long it takes to get 100 guys just a little spread apart, even if they're nose to tail.
It's like trying to corral cats.
Oh my God, dude. And so we went, we probably only got 5 or 6 sections in the whole day. But it was pretty detailed, a lot of information for them. And they were like, everybody was pumped. And I was feeling bad for them. And everybody was pumped. And not one person complained about anything, about how many riders, how long it took or anything. And I'm just like, and I had that one other time. It was at Honda Hills in Ohio. I don't remember Honda Hills. And it was the day before a Trans Am race.
Okay.
And I was to do a school. And that school was the one I decided to have pre-signups, because I had to control this thing. And for me, control was nothing over 25. 20, 25 guys, I could do with no problem. After that, it just gets like your brain just gets clustered. And so I had 102 riders show up to that one.
Wow.
Ohio.
Hey, Gary, how much did you charge per class? How much did you charge each student? Do you remember?
Oh my God. It was $25 a piece. Okay. And now that you asked that question, I showed John DeSoto this the other day. I had class for, it was $25 a piece. I found a little ad in Cycle News. I just stumbled on it. And I remember keeping it because it was funny. And in my ad, because John DeSoto started doing some schools.
Yeah.
John was charging $15 for his school. And so I put This is not a cheap $15 imitation. This is the real thing. My head, it's $25. And I remember John, when I saw him one time, he goes, "Hey, that was wrong, dude. That was so wrong."
Hey, Gary, I've got to take a break. We've got to run a commercial from our sponsor, Motion Pro. We'll be right back with more stories from Gary Bailey.
Hi, Jeff here, introducing you to Motion Pro's magnetic pickup tool today. Now, we've all had that bad experience where we drop a loose part or fastener into a hard to reach place like a skid plate or belly pan. Well, this is the right tool for the job that will retrieve that stubborn part and get you back to working on your ride. As for the features of the magnetic pickup tool, first you have this billet aluminum handle. There's a low profile magnetic tip that's extremely strong and in fact will even pick up a Motion Pro T handle. This flexible shaft can get into hard to reach places and with its protective coating won't damage the finish on your motorcycle. The magnetic pickup tool is affordably priced at $14.99 and is available from your favorite power sports dealer nationwide, so avoid future frustration and pick one up for yourself today.
We're back with the Professor Gary Bailey. We were talking about, of course, his career as a racer, his time at Greaves, his time at Bultaco, and just now how he got started with the motocross schools, with the Gary Bailey Motocross School. Gary, I want to know, when did you actually take the show on the road with the Gary Bailey Motocross School? Because you were doing schools at certain tracks, but there got to be a point where you put a trailer and a truck together and you started going out there and doing it on the road. When did that begin? Let's talk a bit about that.
It didn't take long, because I really liked teaching. And I enjoyed it so much that I had an idea. And my idea was actually David's mother, because, I adopted David.
Yes.
And so David's mother and I were talking, and we weren't married or anything at the time. And I said, "God, I got an idea. What do you think if we do these schools and maybe call up some of these promoters around here, like up the West Coast, up and down and call some of the promoters and tell them that we'd like to come there and do a school and see if you can set it up for let's see if we can set February, March, maybe. Well, let's just do whatever you can figure out in there." And so she got on the phone and started calling people and setting it up, and that sounds great. We'd love to have you come here. And so that kind of started very soon after that in 70 right there. And I started traveling just a little bit north and doing some schools, and, ended up coming back down to where I lived. And it was fairly successful. And so once we got back there, we decided, well, what about if let's start expanding a little bit, maybe we go to Arizona and do that. So that's kind of how the road show started. We had a van. It was one of those vans with the bigger top roof on it, so you could actually stand up a little bit.
Now, was David with you on these trips? Were you taking David with you on these?
No, David was not with us yet. David was still living in California with his natural. And so we traveled. Actually, we had a little bike trail, open bike trailer on the back, and carrying my 3 bikes. And so we lived in this van for a year and a half at least, and we just traveled all over everywhere and did these schools, and some of them were good, some of them were not. And then I had to start doing 2 things. I had to start limiting the schools because some of them were big. I also had to make sure I had a guarantee on schools, because we actually went, I remember we went 500 miles to a school one time when there was 3 riders.
Wow.
And that's what I said. And I'm like, and the guy said, "Oh, there's going to be a lot. Everybody's excited. There's going to be lots of riders." And when I got there, I'm like, "Well, where are they?" And so we had some tough ones. Eventually, it just started getting better and better, and it just a good life on the road. I remember the most exciting thing that Darlene ever had was she used to have to cook on a little 2-burner, propane stove. And one time I moved over, it was her birthday when I bought her a 3-burner stove. I think she died and went to heaven. She was, oh my God, I got 3 things on the stove at the same time. So, yeah, so we had a good time with that, traveling around. And then the next story, I have a lot of firsts. I built the first toy hauler I built. And most people don't know this. In fact, I wish I'd have been smart enough to go, toy hauler, maybe I could get these guys. We go into business, we keep making these things. So I made this trailer.
I do want to hear. I want to interject one thing before you start with the toy hauler story. It was actually your idea to get that toy hauler to Alex Moros, who sends his regards, for the Legends and Heroes display, which is a huge display now at all the Supercross tracks throughout the country, has been for 10 years. But it was actually your van, Gary Bailey, your trailer, that actually got that show started.
But that wasn't the trailer.
No, it wasn't the trailer, but it was your idea.
No, this trailer that I had built, I went to a company that was building trailers right there in Southern California.
Okay.
And I said, I want you guys to build me a trailer. And here's what I want. I want it to have a bedroom, a bathroom, a kitchen area, and then I want everything behind that to be a shop. I want to load my motorcycles in there, and I want to carry them in there. So we talked, and they built this thing, and we actually had an open house, Cycle News, and everybody was there whenever we did it, because this was a toy hauler. We didn't call it a toy hauler because who knew about that? But I actually built that first one. It went pretty good for about 1.5 years. And then they didn't put a heavy enough frame underneath it. So the back part where the bikes and all hanging over the rear wheels, it started bending. And the funniest thing ever, one of the guys from Spain had come over. In fact, it was Mr. Bulto's, it was a relation to Mr. Bulto. And he came over and was with us for a couple of years. And one day he's standing looking at the trailer and he goes, El Serioso Bendo. Back to the trailer. You can see it starting to droop down in the back. And every trip we made, it got worse and worse and worse. Finally, one day I had to park that thing. But yes, the one you're talking about, the rig, I had that built when I had signed with Honda to do my schools. And I got a Freightliner, smaller Freightliner to pull it with, and built the trailer. And then when Legends and Heroes getting ready to start that up, first time they were talking about it was because I talked to them a lot during that time. And they were talking about, we want to do but man, it costs a lot of money, and to buy this rig built, get the rig built, it's going to cost us $100,000, and and I go, you know what? I'm getting ready to get a new rig. How about I will donate this trailer, and you guys take it, boom, and do whatever you're going to do, clean it up a little bit, put your logos, stuff on it, and rewrap it, and you can have it. It's yours. So that was kind of my contributing to helping them get that thing going, because I thought the idea was great.
And it was a big contribution too. I mean, it really gave them a real perceived value once they had that rig and it was wrapped. It was really a rolling motocross museum. Speaking of transportation, I have a new sponsor, Tiny's Towing. They're doing all types of towing for cars, but for you guys who watch the show, he's got some great specials going on east of the Mississippi, all over the East Coast. That's Tiny's Towing, 862-703-8500. He's also on Facebook. Ron Eunice, thank you so much. You were a race promoter too, Gary. How did you get involved in promoting races? Where did that begin?
It began because when I was here at Lake Sugar Tree, I kind of got involved a lot with the racetrack, and then David ended up buying the racetrack. And when David bought the racetrack, I became the promoter. David's name was on it, and he put the money there. But when it came to the work part, I was the guy. So yeah, I did quite a bit of racing and promoting, and I actually tried one time, and I don't get what's wrong with these people. This would have been, let me see if I can get the year pretty close. This would have been like 80, maybe 82, 83, somewhere right in there.
Okay.
There was a guy that had a farm about 10 miles from us. And he had a little track there. And I said, I want to do a European motocross, natural terrain. All I want to do is go out there and cut the weeds down and streamer it. And I know how to we'll get some water on it. And I want to have just a motocross, like European motocross, natural terrain, which is what I got to ride when I went over to Europe in '69 to the grease factory. Their tracks were all natural. I mean, they hadn't been raced for a year, and they just banner it, and there's the track. And that was my type of racing. Well, we did this whole thing, got it all ready, and it bombed because nobody, I mean, I couldn't understand that all of my racers from Sugar wasn't going to go there. And no, I don't like it. I don't like that stuff. I like the groom track, and then just you're not going to groom it. I'm like, what a bunch of crybabies! Oh my god! And David and I just wrote that thing over and over again. We loved it. It was everything you'd never wanted in a motocross race. It was there. So,
but they didn't like it, huh?
No, they didn't like it. They didn't like the natural terrain idea. And of course, then the next thing, over half of them go, oh, I didn't know if that's what it was. If I'd have known that, I'd have been there. And I go, well, I'll tell you who's not going to promote another one. I can tell you that.
Well,
so, so promoting was good. I like doing the promoting thing because I'm really, really, when I do an event, I think of everything that I liked and didn't like about another event.
Right.
Something I went to or events that I did that I didn't like as well. Kind of like when I built Daytona, I did it for 34 years. And I always had video of it. I always went back and looked at it. I always remember what the riders liked, what they didn't like. When I watched the videos, I looked at what had good passing, what didn't have good passing. And so I'd always try to go, okay, I'm going to get rid of this stuff here, and I'm going to use this stuff over here, and we're going to see how this works. I always felt like if I was writing it, what would I want to challenge you and safe?
You know, Gary, while we're talking about, you talked about videotaping the track from the year before and making it the same. Not only, of course, were you an innovator with the motocross school, you also brought video camera into your classes. You videotaped your school going on, and you also ran those tapes back, from what I understand.
Yes,
did you start doing that right when beta and VHS things came out, or how did that transpire?
I had one of the first VH cameras. I couldn't buy into the beta thing only because it was a format. I think it was only owned by Sony. And VHS, there was Panasonic and so I go, I think Sony's trying to get their own little niche in here and get people to buy Sony stuff because you had to have a Sony recorder to use the Sony player. So I went with the VHS stuff. I will say maybe the Sony stuff was a little bit better quality-wise, but I don't think most people, I paid attention to it. I don't know most people would. So when David started pro racing, no, actually, before pro racing, because we were using it 2 years before that.
Using it in your school.
So that we're talking like 78, 79, somewhere right in there. Yeah. I'm using my video camera, and what I thought was, because David and I talk about the races and what we could have done different now. So I went, you know what? Football uses film. And they go back and review it, and the team has to watch this stuff, and they learn the good stuff that worked and what didn't work. And all like that. So I go, I'm going to start videoing. Well, I started videoing it, and David liked watching it. I mean, he'd watch it 2 or 3 times over and over again to see what he could have done different or to see what somebody else was doing. And I just thought that, man, what a better way And why people today don't do it, I don't get it. I don't get why people don't. It's the best training tool you can possibly have.
Yeah.
How many times did I hear things like David say to me? This is when he was, I remember it was High Point. He was on a Kawasaki, 1981, I believe it was. Might have been, it was 81. And his starts were like 15th, 16th place. And he goes, Dad, I know I jumped. I got out there really quick, and I don't understand. They're just beating me. There's horsepower in me away. And I go, and I don't understand. They just pull me going down the straightaway. And I said, David, that's not your problem. I go, David, you're dumping the clutch too hard. And he goes, Dad, I'm not. I'm telling you. So I get my little video out that I've taken, and we get back home, and I go, I want you to watch this really close. So what he did is his reaction was great, but he dumped the clutch so hard that he did a big wheelie, and then as soon as he backs out of it to get the front end down, they just motored away from him. And so he's like, no, I didn't. No, my God, I did. Yeah. So there were so many things that sometimes I would say to him, and he was like, no, man, oh, well, okay, watch the video. Just don't listen to me. Just watch the video. And so he loved watching the video. And then as the racing went on, and he loved watching Brock when he and Brock were racing, because he liked what Brock did. In fact, he said, you know what I really like? I like coming off the line second a lot of times. Because Brock's really smart. Brock can learn the racetrack first lap. He knows every line exactly where to go. He even hasn't been out there for 3 hours because he knows how the track's going to develop. He said, I like second place right behind Brock, 2 laps, watch what he's doing, know what he's doing, then pass him and go, see ya. And but David loved the video, and he'd watch him over and over and over again. Some people get bored with it, but I'm going, if you want to learn, if you really want to learn, if you really want to get better, then there's nothing better than looking at footage. There's nothing better than that.
And you know what, Gary, and I've thought about this many times, and you mentioned adopting David earlier in the conversation. And what I'm saying is that your DNA is not his DNA. He is one of the best racers ever, but it's a testimony to your school and the way you taught him that he went on to be a multi-time champion. I think he was on 5 motocross and Trophy des Nations teams. Your technique and your school really, really brought out the best in him, and I think that certainly is a testimony to what you did as far as teaching a school. I do have one other question about David in a moment, but right now, while it's fresh in my head, I want to know about some other popular names that we might know who took to Gary Bailey School, who went on to have some great success in motocross and supercross.
Well, let's see. Where do we start with that? We can start like 1999, Greg Albertine.
Greg Albertine was one of your students. I think Sebastian Tortelli.
We got Tortelli, we got Rhino, we got Larry Brooks. We've got Justin Barsha. I got 13 years with Travis Pastrana, 9 years with Cooper Webb. Nicoletti. Funny, James Stewart went to one school. And I have an article that's in a magazine from it. And so he never went back. So the article says, hey, so I hear you went to Gary Bailey School and you got smacked with this stick. And he goes, yeah. He smacked me because I had my finger on a clutch. And so he goes, well, what did your dad have to say about that? And he goes, my dad said I should have had my finger on the clutch. but he never come back to another school. So, and then another one. I mean, I'll bring this up because I've listened to a couple of Ricky Carmichael's stories of how he and his mom and dad did their whole thing. And I don't understand a guy like that. I actually worked with Ricky when he was on 60s and 80s for a while.
Okay.
And they say that, and when they say they never went to a school of any kind and they did it all themselves. And I'm like, why do people have to do that? Why can't they just tell the truth? Yeah, I went to Bailey School or whoever else they may have gone to for a few things to kind of get some information. But why can't they mention that? But they don't. I mean, it's like if you're going to tell something, and particularly if it's going to be a documentary, it's supposed to be true. So get your damn facts together and say, oh yeah, we did go for, you know, maybe a couple of months. We did, but I don't understand people. So yeah, but a lot of fun with Cooper. Best story though. Best story.
What?
This would have been 1982.
Yeah.
And Brock, it was between Brock Glover and Donnie Hansen, Yamaha Honda, for the championship. And I get a phone call from Yamaha. And they say, hey, would you be interested? We'd like to hire you for a month. And we'd like you to work with Brock. Well, keep in mind, David's on Team Honda. So
okay.
I'll give you an idea. So we'd like you to work with Brock because we need this championship. And it's between him. Now, if it was David, I wouldn't have done it. But the pay wasn't too bad either. And so I go, yeah. So I went and worked with Brock for a while to fix all the little things that I saw. And by the way, he did end up winning that championship too, me or whatever it was. And I thought that was pretty funny. But what's interesting, my schools, I was getting paid by Kawasaki to do my schools. David riding for Team Honda, and I'm working with getting paid from Yamaha to do it. Everybody's like, dude, how do you pull that off? Okay, so I go over to see David, like between motos and stuff, right? And DeCoster's drawing the line. He goes, there's a line right here. You don't cross it. You go over there working with Yamaha, you don't come into these pits right here. I go, what? I don't care if it is your kid. You do not come into these pits. If he wants to come out and talk to you, but you ain't going into the pits. And I was like, boy, that was, but it was a very interesting time, believe me. I had to do a lot of dancing around things. So
we're going to take one more break. We have to hear from my sponsor, Vinco. When we get back, we'll continue our interview with Gary Bailey. We'll be right back.
Vinco, who already has a full line of vintage parts, now has air shocks that are an exact duplicate of the original air shocks so popular in the late 70s. So whether you're looking to build a full racer or museum showpiece, these shocks will give you that incredible 70s look and improve your bike's performance. These new air shocks are fully rebuildable with Vinco rebuild kits, and all shocks are hand assembled in the USA with all new components. Every component is brand new. Just like the originals, our air shocks are adjustable with 2 chambers, high and low pressure, giving you tremendous flexibility for settings of your bike suspension. The Vinco air shocks come fully assembled and ready for installation. Just add air or nitrogen. The kits include the manual and spacers. Visit Vinco.com to check out the air shocks and all that Vinco has to offer to help you get back on track and to keep that ride going.
We're back with Gary Bailey, and we've got a few more questions. We were just hearing some really interesting stories about how he was teaching Brock Glover how to start while David was on Kawasaki and he's getting paid by Honda. Some really, really great stuff. Gary, a question that I've thought about it for a while, and while preparing the questions for this interview, I figured, well, I may not get another shot at this. You taught David how to ride from when he was a little boy. He went on to become one of America's top motocrossers, multi-time champion, multi-Trophy des Nations and Motocross des Nations teams. Just about at the height of his career, he did suffer an accident, losing his ability to walk. He was paralyzed. I want to know, what was your mental state at that time? When did you hear about that? And how did your family as a whole, because motocross and teaching racing was your life, how did you deal with all that?
You know, there's you go through a lot of hard times in life. I was actually teaching a motocross school in Virginia, and he was out in California running at Lake Huron. Mm-hmm. And that was the week before Anaheim won, which I was supposed to go out there for that, just a few days later. And we got the phone call. And I guess at first I was kind of like, wow. And I know I go, there's probably some hope there. So I was not completely all the way down because I didn't know the severity of it. Even though it was, man, seriously, wow. It was tough. It was tough on all of us. And I always think it was tough on us, but did nothing compared to what it was with David. He was definitely at the height of his career. There's no telling what he could have done from there. Who would have ever expected that? I mean, when it comes to writing, was he perfect? No, but he was damn close to it. And all everybody ever talked about was how smooth he was. And it just, who would have expected it? I mean, but I guess you never know. We don't, I don't guess. We never know when our time is going to come. We never know. We never know when it's going to be done. It could be driving out the driveway. People asked me right at that time, a lot of people said, well, are you going to let Mitchell, who was my youngest son, keep riding? And I was like, well, yeah, if he wants to. I raced 19 years, and I had a few broken bones and stuff, but I also lost a couple of friends in racing.
We had a question. We had a question from a Facebook viewer, Robert Oscar Pomeroy, and his question is: do you still study the style today of riders? In other words, if you're watching a motocross or a supercross race, when you look at Tomac or certainly one of your proteges, Cooper Webb, do you still look at them or the way they race and look at their style, and what are you seeing there?
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard for me to watch a race
and not look at it. Yeah.
But my wife is always, because every time I go to a race, I mean, I got a camera with me, and I just can't go there and just watch the race. I actually I want to look back at it, and I want to see it frame by frame. I want to try and figure out on a day why this Villapoto dominant on this day, but he's 7th the next week. And Tomac is like, and I go back and I look at those things, and I look at styles, and most people won't probably understand this, but my all-time, you would think David would be the all-time. David was the all-time at his time, but for the more this time frame, per se, I always thought Villapoto was just amazing. Amazing to watch. When I watch him in detail, and I watch him close, and I watch him in slow motion, I'm going, this guy does stuff. And I was good because I was with Cooper Webb at the same time, and I could show him. I go, look what Villapoto's doing here, and look what you and all these other guys are doing. Look at the line. Look at how he lands here. And there's one that will stick in my mind till the day I die. It was a finish line jump into a left-hand turn. I don't remember which track it was, because those kind of run together after a while, because they make those cookie cutter tracks. And it lands and it makes a left turn, going through into the start area, because the mechanics are on the outside of the corner, and the corner is very wide because it's going onto the start chute. And I thought I saw this when I was videoing, but it's nice because I go back and see it. Villapoto would land that jump, hold it tighter than everybody, I mean everybody, by at least 5, sometimes 10 feet on the inside, and generally pass whoever was in front of him. And so when I went back and looked at it, and I was great because I don't just video him, I video everybody. So everybody that can shoot it is in the time that I have. And he was the only guy in the air, and this is a small detail, but this makes where the difference was. He was the only guy in the air, already had his finger on the front brake as well as the clutch. When he landed, he could literally start his braking and start the turn. Everybody else never put their finger on the front brake until they landed.
Hmm.
And I'm like going, well, it's no wonder he's killing everybody right there. How can you guys not figure that out? And I mean, he was the only guy out of 20 guys in the main event. He's the only guy with his finger on front brake and the only guy that was on the inside. And those are the little details that I look for. I remember Cooper, when I was with Cooper and we're working together, and I believe it was Anderson. I think it was Anderson. Anyway, it was the other rider, and I think it was Anderson. And Cooper was landing all of his jumps just over perfect, landing on the downside, nose down, power on, look perfect, okay? But, gosh, I don't remember exactly who it was, but it's just killing me right now. But he would jump a bike length further and land with the front end a little bit high, just on the downside of the ramp.
Right.
On every jump, he was jumping one bike length further on every jump and pulling away by 1 or 2 bike lengths. Boom, 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 boom. And when I see something like that, and I take it, particularly if I can see it in a heat race, I take it straight to Cooper. I go, dude, Cooper, look what he's doing right here. I go, dude, there's where you're losing it all right there. Every bit of it's being lost right there. And so now he's got to adjust from that perfect set down, which everybody, oh, you got to land on the down ramp. And you got to, like, no, you don't have to land on the down ramp. And so I just look for details of what he's doing. Same with David and Brock and everybody else. Is like, what is this guy doing different that's making him so good on this day?
Yeah.
Probably one of them was Ron Lachine. Ron Lachine could always go to Seattle, which generally the dirt was wet and a lot of ruts in it. Ron Lachine could be finished in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, goes there and he wins. And he wins. And I'm like, okay, there's something here. This guy's not, obviously he's comfortable with that, with those deep ruts, but there's something else. And I watch it and I watch it and I watch it over again. And one day I noticed it, but I thought everybody was doing it. He would drop into the corner and he had his finger, and this is deep ruts now, long deep ruts. And he's got his finger on the front brake. What is he accomplishing? He's getting his front end to stay down.
Yeah.
Stay in the rut where everybody else, when they get on the gas, the front end's trying to pop up and they're trying to recover from it. And he literally would use the front brake all the way through that deep rut. And I'm like going, he's completely changed how the bike handles. This is what I like about Villapoto. Villapoto controlled what his back end suspension was doing, what his front end suspension was doing, what he did with his body to get traction. I mean, this guy from Wino, and I remember when it was Wygant come to me one time, and he said, was it Wygant? Or was it one of the announcer guys come to me? He says, hey, what's with this new style? You're always head over the front end, arms up, blah, 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 and Villapoto's got his arms down all the time. And I'm like, really? Oh, I had noticed that. And so, but I had noticed it. I said, so, okay, so he's always got, okay, so when he goes through the whoops, he's got his arms down? Well, no, not there. Oh, okay. And when he's in the middle of this turn right here, is he with his arms up and head? Well, not there. Well, is it on the jump? When he goes over the jump? Well, not there. And I'm like, where is it? He goes, well, and because everybody else is kind of that form, so when that's not there, well, when he's exiting a corner, and I go, yeah, that's right. Oh, good, you notice that. Do you know why he does that? No, I guess that's the new way to do it. I go, no. Check it out. He goes around the corner, his head's forward, his arms up, everything's perfect. While he's still on the gas, the rut ends, and he goes into this harder, packed, slick stuff. So what does he do? He drops his arms down. He scoots back a little bit. He goes from a complete power slide to a wheelie coming out of the corner. Perfect every single time. And I'm going, why can't people figure that out? Why is nobody seen this guy going, dude, there it is, doing it, watch him. And
I'm so impressed with the fact that you still watch races, and that you can, not that you still watch races, but that you can analyze a rider's style. If I'm not, I mean, you just turned 79, didn't you, in October?
That is correct.
That is correct. And you are just as still as sharp as you ever were. And Preston Petty Products. You know, they're a big sponsor of our show, Vintage Motocross Q&A, and have been for a couple of years. I would encourage everybody to get over to PrestonPettyProducts.com. There's always something great going on there. Speaking of Preston Petty Products, I bet you got a real good Preston Petty story for me, Gary.
Preston, great dude, first class all the way. I remember the day I was at a motocross race and Preston shows up. I guess he had just signed a deal with Suzuki, and he had that twin pipe Suzuki.
Yeah.
And when I remember looking at it going, shit, I'm just gonna load my shit up and go home. This thing's got to be better than anything we're riding. And it was definitely top of the line. But yeah, Preston and I weren't good friends, but we raced together a lot. We talked a lot. You know, he was, I don't know, just one of the guys that you knew when you were racing and go how close to get, you knew that you could trust what he was doing. And yeah, what a gentleman, what a fine, gosh, why do we all have to get like that? And the last time I saw Preston, I was really kind of depressed because he kind of was on his way, you know, pretty much not doing very well. And that was kind of hard for me to watch, because it's just like, God, you know what? This is one of the guys that from the beginning. And what are we going to have? What are we going to have when Preston and me and Gunnar Lindstrom and Lars Larson and John DeSoto and you know, we've already lost Tim Hart and a few of the other guys, and you know, Billy Silverthorne. Who's gonna show and talk about the history of our sport when that's gone? There's a lot of times the only guy that really writes about it for me is Davey Coombs, and I think that's great. But Davey Coombs is writing what he thinks he knows. He's writing what a story that he may have heard from somebody, but that loses it after 2 or 3 people tell the story. I mean, I'm just happy he's doing anything because nobody else is.
Right.
But this has to come from the guys like me that were there, you know, and it's just going away, and it's not going to be long. I mean, damn it, I'm 79 years old.
Gary, I have interviewed every person that you just mentioned: John DeSoto, Lars Larson, Gunnar Lindstrom. I even got Preston Petty, his last interview, sadly, before he passed away, when he moved back with Mary to Texas. I have an interview with each and every one of those people. And look, I don't know if I'm going to save the history of the sport all on my own, but I know it's very, very important. And that's why I'm doing what I do.
You know, the kids today, damn, I love NASCAR, because NASCAR, like, they do a lot with the history, and they try to make sure that people know the history of where the sport and the tracks and
yes.
I mean, a lot of kids today don't even know that Roger DeCoster is. How can you not know who Roger DeCoster is, dude? It's unless you just don't give a crap. You know, I mean, I would think. I don't know. I always wanted to know when I was coming up where it started and who was there, you know.
Right.
Today they just don't care. They don't care.
Well, because, you know, and we can talk about this for a long time too, but we don't really have that much more time. Terry Good, the International Motocross Museum, the man has the most amazing collection in the world, but he has an amazing collection of memorabilia, and he's got a lot of things that it's all about the history of the sport. And as he said to me just a couple of weeks ago when I saw him, or about a month ago now, he said, you know, you can ask any kid who's into baseball who Joe DiMaggio or Babe Ruth is, and regardless of that kid's age, he's probably going to know who those guys are, even if he's 12, 13, 14, or 15. You can ask a 20-year-old motocrosser today, who's Roger DeCoster, and you'd be lucky if the guy could say he was the manager for KTM. You'd be lucky, because if he wasn't the manager of KTM, he wouldn't know who he was.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah,
Gary, we
yeah,
are just about out of time, so I wanted to give you a moment to talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. If there's anyone you want to thank, if there's anybody you want to say anything to in any way, shape, or form, why don't you take a minute and say whatever you want to say.
I'd just like to thank every one of my sponsors and everybody that ever helped me, give me the opportunity to be successful with what I did. And obviously thank God for blessing me with the opportunity to accomplish what I accomplished and become a motocross teacher above racing, because I know that I've worked and helped thousands and thousands of riders. It's nice every once in a while I get a letter from somebody that says, "Oh, by the way, man, I appreciate everything, but I was that young punk in the school that thought I knew everything, and you'll probably remember the crash I had because I was being a smart ass." And then I laugh about it. And you get those letters, and it's just great. And some of them are 20, 30 years ago. I get guys that call me that took a school in 1970 and say, "Do you have like any of the old diplomas? And could, like, my name was da-da-da, and I went to such a school. Is there any ways you could send me a diploma? Because I want to have it hanging on my wall." I've been in some doctors and lawyers' offices that were friends of mine, and they got their certificate from school hanging on the wall with their diplomas, graduation stuff, and I'm laughing, going, "That's pretty funny to have that stuff there, you know." And I mean, right now I've got a few health issues, and I would thank my wife, Diana, and because she knows a lot about medical stuff, and she keeps on me, and I believe that if she wasn't here, that I wouldn't be here, because I have issues that she spots and notices, and she takes care of everything. So it's good. I mean, I still do pretty good, but you know, there's some things that I just let slide and that aren't good to just let slide. And she's like, "No, you're going to the doctor. We're getting this fixed." So yeah, just God, everybody, just pay attention and be safe and enjoy, man. The sports got too serious, and I think everybody needs to put a little bit more fun into it.
I want to thank you for being my guest today. And once again, go look for this book, How to Win at Motocross by Gary Bailey. Gary, if there's ever a time you want to come back and chat about anything, you just give me a holler and I'll be happy to put you back on, okay?
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it, man. It's been great. And I'm glad that there's somebody still out there who remembers those old guys.
I remember. Thanks again, Gary.
Thank you.
Bye for now. This is Joe Abadi. I want to thank the professor, Gary Bailey, for joining me today. I enjoyed all of his stories, and it's all made possible by Motion Pro, Vinco, Full Circle Racing, Preston Petty Products, Northwest Mako CZ, Racer X, Tiny's Transportation, a new sponsor of ours. He's doing towing and transport all over the East Coast, east of the Mississippi, so get a hold of Ron Eunice, and the York Swap Meet is coming up too. Thanks again. This has been Vintage Motocross Q&A. I'm Joe Abadi. We'll see you next time.